Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I talk about the movies I have just seen while I am driving home from the theater. First of all, before I get into it, let me just say I'm sorry that I've been away for a while. It's been a couple weeks in between reviews. I had a show opening, so my attention was somewhat divided. And as I've said a couple times on this podcast, this isn't my job. This is a hobby, so therefore, there are times I just can't make the time. The minute somebody decides they're going to pay me to do this, yes, I will make the time to make sure there is a review every single week. But unfortunately, until such time, they happen when they happen. That's life. So anyway, that's enough of that. Let's talk about something that I truly love. And this might not be something a lot of people know about me. That's not something that comes up a lot in reviews or regular conversation. Unlike my love of comic books, my love of the Muppets, my love of pro wrestling, things of that nature, one that kind of slips through the cracks is that I am a big time fan of classic cartoons, classic animation. I'm talking like the early Disney stuff, the Looney Tunes, the Tex Avery cartoons. These were the things that I was raised on, These were the things that were on very reliably on children's TV back when I was a kid, was repackaging of these classic cartoons. Back in the day, so many people might not realize this, before the Disney Channel became Tween Central. I don't think there even is a Disney Channel anymore. It's all on their streaming, but we'll talk about that later. Became this tween-centric kind of platform. The Disney Channel, when it first started, was a place to catch all of their classic content, including various combinations and repackagings of their classic cartoons. I remember Donald Duck Presents. I remember DTV, Masterpiece Theater. These are the cartoons I was raised on. And out of all of them, the Looney Tunes were always my favorite. Always my favorite, with Daffy Duck being by far my favorite. I reference the Looney Tunes when I'm directing. I use the relationship between Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck as a reference point multiple times. And Duck Amuck is probably my favorite cartoon of all time. And imagine how sad it makes me. The older I get, the fewer people, not just kids, but the fewer people get my classic Looney Tunes references. I'm okay with people not getting my Abbott and Costello or my Mystery Science Theater 3000 references, because those are esoteric, I admit, but not getting my Looney Tunes references, that just hurts. It makes you wonder what happened to these kids' childhoods. But things change. So imagine my surprise when I discover that somehow, without any kind of fanfare or warning or advertisement, really, I saw nothing about this movie prior to just kind of scrolling through a list of upcoming films and seeing it there, that somehow a full-length Looney Tunes movie was being released in 2025. Especially considering that Warner Brothers, which the more I hear, the more I tend to believe is being run by a bunch of drunken gibbons than actual people, seemingly has done a lot to undercut one of their most profitable sets of IPs. They were going to do this whole mixed live action and cartoon film called Wile E. Coyote vs. Acme, which apparently everybody involved with it said was really funny and really good, and that one got shelved along with the Batgirl movie as part of some tax cheat. The week that this movie that we're going to talk about here today, the day the Earth blew up, the day it's released, or the weekend it's released, HBO and Warner Brothers removes all of the Looney Tunes content from HBO Max. Why would you do that? That makes no sense, because the first thing I did or wanted to do after seeing this movie was go watch some classic Looney Tunes. So why would you cut the knees out from under you? And I read, people are like, oh, it only made $3 million. Well, yeah, nobody fucking knew about it. Maybe if you want people to come see your movie, tell people that this movie existed. And it's just bizarre that somehow this film slipped through the cracks and managed to make it to theaters. And of course I was going to go see it. It's a fascinating artifact for a number of reasons. Almost the different reasons it's interesting that it even exists is almost more interesting than the movie itself. Which, let's talk the movie itself before I get off on a tangent, because there's a lot of tangents to get off on in discussing this film. So the basic plot is that you've got Porky Pig and Daffy Duck. They are, in this continuity, they're kind of adopted brothers, and they lived with a guy, Farmer Dave, and Farmer Dave died, quote unquote, and left them the house that they live in, and their house is about to get torn down because they haven't kept up with it, and they have to go get jobs, and a lot of comedy ensues. But all of this coincides with an alien launching a series of brain-sucking mind control super gum onto the populace, which turns the populace of Earth into gum zombies, and Porky, Daffy, and Petunia Pig have to team up in order to stop it. So that's our basic plot. How is it? It's good. It's fun. It's a fun movie. With some genuinely great belly laughs. And, like I said, just a lot of fascinating choices and elements to it. There's an actually quite clever plot twist about a third of the way through that reshuffles everything, and it's actually one of the more clever plot twists I've seen. It's way better than anything I've ever seen in an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I'm not going to talk about it here, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, so don't worry about that.
Spoiler alert!
No, spoiler alert!
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
But yeah, the movie is pretty fun. It's a Warner Brothers cartoon. It's a Looney Tunes cartoon. It's really hard to fuck that up. But like I said, there's not a whole lot to discuss about the movie itself. Without kind of getting into the more interesting tidbits about, or the more interesting facts of its very existence. So I want to take a look at those. We'll talk kind of more about the movie as we go through. But the basic review of the movie is that it's good. I have a few issues with it, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the movie itself is good. It's entertaining. It's funny. But a lot of its interesting elements come from these other aspects. So let's talk about that for a second. So this movie is really unique for a number of reasons. Not just the reason that it exists, but which is a small miracle unto itself, but the format in which it exists is incredibly interesting. Without any fanfare, without anybody really talking about it, this is, I believe, the very first completely original, full-length Looney Tunes animated movie. What I mean by that is there have been several Looney Tunes movies, not counting things like, Space Jam or Back in Action or Space Jam 2, which are cartoon and live action mix. I'm talking about actual animated theatrical releases. But the thing about that is that I believe all of them, with the exception of this one, have all been just repackaging of the classic era cartoons using a very thin framing device in order to link them all together. It's kind of like a jukebox musical on Broadway. You take all these disconnected songs and then try to come up with a narrative that links them all together. You look at things like 1001 Rabbit Tales, where Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck are selling books, and Bugs Bunny ends up, doing the Scheherazade thing and telling all of these stories to Yosemite Sam's bratty kid. And there you can put in all the cartoons. Daffy Duck's Fantastic Island did the same thing. The characters would come and wish for various elements, and that would be there where they'd show the cartoon. Daffy Duck's Quackbusters was all like the supernatural and spooky cartoons. So you get all these ones with a general theme and just link them together with these framing devices. This is the first fully original Looney Tunes cartoon. Also interesting of note is that this is not, in general terms, a full-on Looney Tunes movie. This is a Daffy Duck and Porky Pig movie. There are no other Looney Tunes characters in this film. There's no cameos. As far as I could see, there were no, Easter eggs of other characters. It was just them. Which is funny to me, because you have all of this IP. The main antagonist of this movie is an alien, so you'd think they'd plug in Marvin the Martian. But they don't. They get just some brand new alien villain. Bugs Bunny doesn't pop up anywhere. There's this home, I forget what it is. It's like the homeowners association or whatever, woman who comes and, is mean to them and is gonna, take their house. You'd think that'd be a place you'd plug in Yosemite Sam or something like that. But they don't do that. It's just them. The only other Looney Tunes character is Petunia Pig, who gets her New Millennium kind of upgrade. And Petunia Pig, unlike characters like Lola Bunny was created just for Space Jam to actually have a female character amongst the male-dominated Looney Tunes roster, and to help drop kick a generation of young men and young women into early and very confused puberty. And ever since then, Lola has been a part of the Looney Tunes roster whenever they do a new project. Petunia has actually been around since the early days. She was in several Porky Pig cartoons when they were in black and white, with really no discernible personality that I can, kind of the same way Minnie Mouse was in the original Mickey Mouse cartoon. She really didn't have a personality other than the girl mouse. And so Petunia Pig was the girl pig. And as far as I'm aware, she has not really gotten the modern day update in the way that a lot of other characters have. So this is now her chance where they reimagine her as kind of this Amy Farrah Fowler kind of cute nerd thing, which works really well. I like the redesign of Petunia, and I like the combination of her, Porky, and Daffy. They make an interesting trio. But that leads to kind of one of the most interesting and kind of one of the more jarring aspects of this. If you're a longtime Looney Tunes fan, one of the major aspects and the dynamics of this movie might be a little hard for you to get into at first. It took me a little bit until I kind of made a realization that helped it all click for me. So this movie hangs on the relationship between Porky Pig and Daffy Duck. And I do mean relationship. This takes them, and like I said, it makes them adopted brothers and best friends, and their relationship is what is the emotional core of the film. This film actually tries to have an emotional core and does a pretty damn good job of it. Now, this might feel jarring to a lot of people, especially when you consider how most people view this dynamic, and more specifically, how people view the character of Daffy Duck. So, for most of his history, the most recognizable character depiction of Daffy Duck has been the narcissist, the greedy little backstabbing sneak. To use his own words, he's despicable. You know, he really, because a lot of these characters just kind of were very generic. At first, Daffy was just a crazy duck. Literally a Daffy Duck. And he didn't really come into his own and become a standout character until they made him into a foil for Bugs Bunny and kicked off the very famous, duck season, wabbit season type thing.
Wabbit season. Duck season. Wabbit season. Wabbit season. Duck season. Fire!
So that tends to be the personality that a lot of people associate, the one I associate with Daffy Duck. With that in mind, there are a couple different layers to the Daffy and Porky relationship and the Daffy and Porky pairing throughout the various cartoons. There are basically 4 different genres that these two kind of fit into. Firstly, you have that more antagonistic relationship where they have kind of a Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd thing going on. Only a lot of times Porky is not actually doing anything that directly affects Daffy. He's just, trying to relax or trying to live his life, and Daffy just decides to fuck with him just for no good reason. You see this in things like Porky's Duck Hunt, My Favorite Duck, Riff Raff Ducky, or Riff Raff Duck Daffy, I'm sorry. So that's one. The other kind of relationship that you got was more of what I would classify an Abbott and Costello dynamic, where you had Daffy as this fast-talking con man who took a lot of joy in causing pain and discomfort and making profit off of poor, hapless Porky Pig. You see that in things like the Ducksters, A Dime to Retire, Most famously, Daffy and Porky worked best as a kind of hero sidekick approach, with Daffy being the loudmouth narcissist whose mouth would constantly write checks that his body couldn't cash, and Porky would end up being the kind of more competent of the two who would actually get them out of trouble when Daffy's blustering literally would blow up in his face. You see this in things like Robin Hood Daffy, Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, Deduce You Say, Dip Along Daffy. That's not what happens here. None of that. If you go further back into the Warner Brothers canon, there are a few small examples of Porky and Daffy being teamed up, but they're in more of a Laurel and Hardy relationship. meaning that they're friends or roommates or they work together or whatever. There's no outward animosity between them. Daffy is just kind of off the wall and impulsive and a little daffy, and Porky is the more down-to-earth, grounded one, and the comedy comes from how these two characters deal with specific situations. You see that in things like Baby Bottleneck, Tick-Tock Tuckered, Porky's Pig Feet. And this is the relationship that this movie chooses to put on screen, to make the primary relationship. And it's bizarre. It's a little off-putting at first, because we're used to seeing Daffy take advantage of or, stab in the back his friends or co-stars. But they are genuinely friends in this one. They are good-natured towards each other. They like each other. They do a fascinating thing. This is, when Petunia Pig enters the picture, you think kind of where this is going to go, that this is going to become one of those, okay, two best friends, one of them falls in love with a girl, the other one feels left out and starts, behaving badly, trying to get rid of the other person, and so that they can have their friend back all to themselves. We've seen that play out. That's not what they do. Daffy is genuinely supportive of Porky and Petunia. He helps them get together. He helps Porky get the courage to ask her out. He doesn't have any real problem with Petunia being a part of their group. His only real problem is the feeling like he wants to still be a part of the group and not be excluded. But he doesn't hold any animosity against Petunia. He likes her, and he's happy that Porky has someone in his life that he likes. That is just really, really weird to see from a Daffy Duck character. But the reason I kind of give all those examples, and the reason I go through the great lengths of pointing out all these examples, is that it's not, as you might originally think, out of character. It's out of the established character that we are aware of, but again, looking back, it's not out of character. They've done things like this before. And it's a smart choice. This is a smart choice. One, it makes Daffy Duck a bit more likable. Now, I love Daffy Duck. I love Donald Duck. I love the Ducks. But you also have to acknowledge that in team-up vehicles, they are usually the problem. They're usually the cause of alarm or whatnot. In some cases, they're the antagonist. So, they already have an antagonist. So, taking Daffy and making him more as he was in some of those early and not as well-known cartoons gave them that room to actually build a real relationship. And again, that's something else that's crazy about this movie, is that this movie could have gotten by on its laurels. It could have leaned back. It could have just said, we've got Daffy and Porky. Everybody knows their dynamic. Everybody knows those two characters. Just let them go. But they decided, no, we want to have an actual story and an actual emotional core. And I applaud them for that. And I think for the most part that that choice paid off. I think that it makes this a much stronger film than had they just, like I said, just kind of gone, well, let's just make this easy on ourselves. This movie is a real throwback in a lot of ways. It's 2D animation, which we're going to talk about here in a second. It's Looney Tunes. It also owes a lot of its visual cues and identity and music cues and things to, I guess, what would now be classic rock, Bryan Adams, REM, And nods and references to things like The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Blob, The Stuff, classic, B-level drive-in horror movie stuff. Not stuff that your average young person is going to be that aware of. Stuff that I'd say not even a lot of parents these days are going to be aware of, to be completely honest. And again, I don't find any of that as a problem. I don't see any of that as an issue because I love all of that stuff. So for me, this was heaven. There are only a few things about this movie that I did not really enjoy. Number one, I felt it was a little too long, which is bizarre to say, but I would imagine an animated movie of this caliber clocking in at maybe an hour and a half. This one ran, I think, an hour 45, leaning closer to an hour 50 if I did my math right, which that's never a dependable thing. And it did feel like it went, and then we introduced a new complication, and then it started over again almost. Maybe I just felt that way because I drank a soda and really, really, really had to pee and wanted the movie to end so I could go to the bathroom and not piss my pants. That could be it. But on the whole, it just felt like it stretched out a little too much. Minor complaint. The only other thing I had an issue with, and this is a preference thing. I understand that this is a little different than I think a lot of people's point of view, but it's my show, so I will say it. I did not like the animation style. I really hate the animation style that this is done in. It's ugly to me. It's this squishy, very unappealing exaggeration of ugly faces and whatnot, and it's more modern. It reminds me a bit of slightly better animated Ren and Stimpy, and to me that's not only just not the Looney Tunes. The Looney Tunes always had some very crisp animation, but it's also just really unpleasant to look at for a long period of time. And it mixes in a lot of other forms of animation for very little reason, as far as I could ascertain. For instance, the farmer Dave, the guy who kind of adopted and raised Porky, kind of their surrogate dad, his animation is almost entirely a still picture, a still painting of the character with only his mouth being animated. It's very much like a Clutch Cargo kind of thing. It's very, again, it's not nice to look at. It's ugly and off-putting, at least to me. And they do that with a lot of the movie. They break off into suddenly a different form of animation, and it doesn't look good. If I had to take a guess, and I am taking a guess here, I would say that the reason it does that is because this is, like I say, this is an anachronism. Everything about this film is an anachronism in today's movie-going lexicon. I mean, this is a 2D animated movie. Disney doesn't even do those anymore. And I have a feeling that the animators, who you must love your job if you're an animator. First off, if you're a hand-drawn animator, you must really love your job because you don't get a chance to do it as often as you used to. So I get this feeling that these animators kind of said, we want to do as much as we possibly can with this movie because we don't know if we're going to get another shot. When's the next time we're going to do another 2D animated film? You know? So I get the feeling that a lot of this was done just to, just to do it. Just because you have the opportunity, so let's go ahead and take advantage of that. And I can't blame them for that. It does make the film's overall aesthetic jarring. And like I say, the animation they settle on for 90% of it is not pleasant to look at for me. But that is really the only issue I had with the only two issues I had with this movie. On the whole, it was clever, it was original, it was new, like I say, an anachronism. And I had some genuine deep laughs watching this movie. So I hope people find this film. I hope people go, take your kids, introduce them to the Looney Tunes, because I'm going to get off on a little bit of a tangent here. This has nothing to do with reviewing the movie. This is just something I was thinking about in terms of why I think this movie is important and why I think, once again, Warner Brothers and HBO dropped the ball by taking all of the classic Looney Tunes off of their streaming service right when this movie is being released, is that this would have been a great way to get kids introduced to these characters again. Because it occurs to me that in the streaming era, kids may have the access to all of these things, theoretically, but they don't really have the drive to seek them out. What I mean by that is that, again, I fell in love with these, and I think a lot of people of my generation fell in love with these because they were on TV all the time. When you're flipping through channels and you're looking for something to watch, there was a reliable thing, and you could find them on a lot of different channels. You could always find the Looney Tunes on somewhere. These days, with streaming, you don't really have that ability. You don't have the ability really to discover anything new unless you to use a kind of a hackneyed phrase, but oddly apt for a discussion about the Warner Brothers characters, unless you choose to go down the rabbit hole and find more stuff. But streaming is often used, at least it's been my experience, and seeing other people and young people interact with the medium, streaming is just kind of where you watch things you already know. As opposed to going on a journey and looking for something to watch and finding something classic that you suddenly discover you enjoy. So this would be a great way to get kids reintroduced to the Looney Tunes. And they've dropped the ball. Warner Brothers, again, has dropped the ball so spectacularly, you can't help but feel like it's on purpose. So I do encourage people to go see this movie. I do encourage people to seek this movie out. Take your kids to see it. You will enjoy it. And I also encourage you to seek out the original Looney Tunes. They're important. They're part of history. They're commentary on the times they were made, for good or ill. I truly believe it's important that we view things like that. I really do. And cartoons, especially of certain eras, are a gateway into history. And I would hate to see that gateway closed due to lack of interest. So, yeah, please, go watch this movie. So, final grade. Let's get to it. Final grade for the day the Earth blew up. I'm giving it a B+. I'm giving it a B+. I did take quite a few points off for the ugly animation style because it really did affect it. But overall, highly enjoyable, highly original, more effort put into it than I think anybody really needed to, and I applaud that. And just a good time at the movies. And I wish the theater had been filled to see it. So please, take your kids to see this and have a good time yourself. Okay, so there you have it. that is my take on the day the Earth blew up, a Looney Tunes movie. So thank you for coming along with me. Thanks for listening. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.